Imagine, just for a second, that you are strapped to a chair.
Okay.
You're blindfolded. You completely can't move.
Yeah.
And you can hear footsteps approaching down the hallway.
Yeah.
Heavy boots on concrete.
Right.
But you have absolutely no way of knowing what's about to happen. Is the person walking through that door going to, I don't know, shake your hand and offer you a glass of water?
Yeah.
Or are they going to punch you in the face?
Yeah, that visceral level of uncertainty, that constant sort of wavering expectation of pain or relief, that isn't just annoying. It's not just stressful.
Right.
It is actually a documented torture technique. It's psychological warfare, really, designed to completely break a subject down by destroying their ability to predict the future.
And according to the dispatch we are analyzing today,
Yeah.
that is the exact analogy. The word torture is actually being used to describe the security situation in Europe right now, here in early 2026.
It is a really heavy start, I know.
It is.
But the sources we have today, they really don't pull any punches. We're looking at a restricted military forum from Tallinn, Estonia, some intelligence reports from the Baltic states, and some very blunt French diplomatic cables. And they all kind of suggest that torture is the only word that really fits the current mood.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to decode these mixed signals that are currently, well, paralyzing the Western alliance.
Yeah.
We're going to look at why the U.S. is acting like a flickering light bulb.
Yeah.
Why Russia might economically actually need eternal war just to keep the lights on. And we're going to break down a specific prediction for the years 2028 to 2030 that is keeping European generals awake at night.
And if I had to summarize the theme of this deep dive in one word, I think it would be ambiguity.
Ambiguity.
Yeah. We are looking at a geopolitical landscape where the superpowers have just stopped sending clear signals. And when the big players get ambiguous, everyone else is basically on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
So let's unpack this torture analogy first, because it feels dramatic, right?
Yeah, it does.
But the source material says it stems from a very specific place: the current relationship between the United States and its European allies. And it highlights a recent post by Donald Trump on Truth Social.
Right.
Now, usually we skim these, but this one, depending on how you read it, it's either the absolute salvation of Ukraine or the end of the NATO alliance.
And that is the problem right there. It's like a Rorschach test of foreign policy. You see exactly what you want to see in it, and that is dangerous.
Okay, so let's look at the text itself. In this post, he calls Russia a paper tiger.
Which, on the surface, sounds really dismissive of Putin. If you're a frantic official in Kyiv, you see that and think, great, he doesn't respect Russia's military strength. He thinks they're weak.
Right, and he says explicitly in the text that Ukraine can recover all of its territory.
Again, that sounds like a maximalist pro-Ukraine stance. That's the shake your hand and give you water part of the torture analogy.
Right, but then literally in the same breath, he wishes luck to both sides. Like it's a football match on a Sunday afternoon. Good luck to both teams.
It trivializes the conflict.
Yeah.
And then comes the kicker. He adds the caveat that U.S. weapon supply depends entirely on European payments.
Right. Pay up. So you read these 12 lines of text, and half the analysts see a firm commitment to Ukrainian victory, and the other half see a cynical washing of hands, like a pay up or we're out kind of deal.
Exactly. And we aren't taking sides here. We're just reporting what the sources say the reaction is. And this is where that torture comparison comes in. The source argues that this inconsistency isn't accidental, it's structural.
What do you mean by structural?
Well, if you are a leader in Estonia or Poland or Lithuania, you are trying to base your entire national survival strategy on a signal that changes frequency every hour.
Wow, yeah.
It keeps allies in a state of constant disorienting confusion. You can't plan, you can't relax, you are constantly bracing for impact, but you don't know where the blow is actually coming from.
But let me play devil's advocate for a second here. Isn't that just strategic ambiguity? We hear that term thrown around all the time in foreign policy, keeping your cards close to your chest.
That's a great question, but there's a key difference here. Usually, strategic ambiguity is used against your enemies.
Oh.
You keep the enemy guessing so they don't know how you'll react. Here, the ambiguity is directed at the allies. And the source points out that while the words are confusing, the actions on the ground are painting a much starker, clearer picture.
Right. The difference between the tweets and the receipts, basically.
Exactly.
Because the report notes that despite the rhetoric, the U.S. government has effectively stopped financing Ukraine's war efforts. They have refused to update sanctions against Russia.
And maybe most concerning for the Baltic states specifically, and this is something that doesn't always make the front page, there's been a quiet cancellation of military training programs and logistical support.
That feels huge. So if you are sitting in a government office in Tallinn or Vilnius, you see the post saying Russia is a paper tiger. But you look out the window, and the American logistical support is literally packing up the trucks and leaving.
That gap between what is said and what is done, that is the torture. It creates a vacuum. It creates doubt. And in geopolitics, a vacuum never stays empty for very long.
And let me guess who loves a vacuum.
Vladimir Putin.
Yeah. Which brings us to that military forum in Tallinn. The generals there, these are people who spend their entire lives looking at satellite maps and intelligence briefings. They're using a very specific metaphor for what Russia is doing right now. They say Putin is poking NATO with a stick.
It's a vivid image, isn't it? It sounds almost juvenile, but it's deadly serious. He's poking the beast to see if it's still alive. Is it going to bite back? Is it going to roar? Or is it just going to roll over and go back to sleep?
And the source mentions that this poking had moved into a crescendo of hybrid warfare. And they pinpoint a very specific turning point, a meeting in Alaska. Since then, things have gotten weird.
Weird is putting it mildly. We are talking about sabotage. But let's pause for a second and define hybrid warfare, because it gets thrown around a lot in the news, and I want to make sure we know exactly what we're talking about here.
Please do. Because to me, war is tanks, missiles, trenches. What does hybrid war look like?
Hybrid warfare is about staying just below the threshold of open conflict. It's the gray zone. It's plausible deniability.
Okay.
It's cutting an undersea cable but blaming it on a dragging anchor from a fishing boat. It's jamming GPS signals so commercial flights have to reroute. It's cyber attacks that take down a hospital system but just can't be traced back to the Kremlin with 100% certainty.
So it's basically weaponized harassment.
Exactly. It's designed to degrade your society without giving you a clear reason to actually shoot back. The report lists cables being cut in the Baltic Sea involving vessels with Chinese flags, but they have Russian crews.
That's specifically designed to confuse the response, isn't it? If it's a Chinese ship, you can't just fire on it without starting World War III with Beijing.
Precisely. It creates a diplomatic knot that takes weeks to untangle. And meanwhile, the cable is cut. The damage is done. We're also seeing drones and fighter jets incurring into border countries just for a minute. Just enough to trigger the air raid sirens, force NATO jets to scramble, and then they turn back.
It just sounds exhausting, just constantly being on edge.
It is. It's a constant low-level static of aggression. But here's what gets really interesting and concerning. The NATO generals at this forum admitted something pretty startling. They don't actually understand the specific strategic goal of these posts.
Yeah, they don't know what he wants. I thought the goal was just to be annoying, to disrupt things.
Well, they know what he's doing. He's finding vulnerabilities. But they don't know exactly why right now. The source draws a parallel to the early days of the Ukraine invasion. For a long time, Western intelligence couldn't quite grasp the end game. They are feeling that exact same confusion now. Is Putin trying to provoke a war right now? Is he trying to fracture the alliance politically? Or is he just measuring the temperature?
Measuring the temperature before jumping in the pool.
Precisely. And this leads to the ultimate anxiety for Eastern Europe. The source frames it as the uncomfortable question.
Which is?
If push comes to shove, are American, German, French, or Spanish citizens actually willing to go to war to defend Estonia or Poland?
Oof. That is the nightmare scenario. Because Article 5 says an attack on one is an attack on all. But if the attack is just a cut cable or a drone that accidentally crashed,
then the political will to send soldiers to die for it evaporates. And Putin knows that. He is testing that resolve with every cut cable. He is asking, do you care about this? How about this? What if I do this? And if the response is silence or ambiguity, he takes a step forward.
Now, hold on. There's a counter-argument here that I feel like we have to address. You might think, well, surely Russia can't keep this up forever. We hear all the time that their economy is sanctions hit, that they're running out of steam. I mean, we see the videos of inflation and the lines. Surely they can't afford to pick a fight with NATO.
And that is the logical assumption. In a normal world, you'd be absolutely right. But the intelligence reports in this deep dive suggest something very different, or at least much more paradoxical.
Paradoxical how?
The Baltic secret services, who are generally considered the best informed on Russia because, well, they are neighbors, they say that yes, the finances are weakened. The war economy boom has peaked.
Right, they mentioned inflation, lines at gas stations, plummeting consumption. The source compares the repression levels to the late Brezhnev era. That does not sound like a country capable of sustaining a global conflict.
And that is exactly the trap we fall into. We assume economic weakness leads to peace. We assume that when a country runs out of money, it stops fighting. But the source argues the exact opposite here. Yeah. The expert analysis, specifically citing Alexander Prokopenko, is that Russia has militarized its economy to the point of no return.
The point of no return. What does that actually mean in economic terms?
Think about it. Over the last few years, they have reoriented their entire industrial base around the war. The source gives a staggering statistic. Russia plans to spend 7.5 times more on defense than on healthcare in the coming years.
7.5 times.
Yes.
And this is while they have thousands of wounded soldiers returning from the front.
Precisely. Healthcare demand is doubling, but all the money is going to tanks and shells. But here's the critical aha moment regarding the economy. Cutting military spending now would cause an immediate economic collapse.
Hold on, walk me through that. Usually, stopping a war saves money. You stop buying missiles, you have more money for schools and roads.
In a normal economy, yes, but Russia is no longer a normal economy. It is a zombie economy kept alive entirely by military spending. Defense spending is the only thing keeping the lights on. It is the only sector driving employment, the only sector driving factory output. If you stop the war, you stop the factories. If you stop the factories, you have mass unemployment.
So the war isn't just a political goal anymore, it's basically a fiscal stimulus package.
Exactly. It's a stimulus package made of blood and steel. The source used an analogy that actually gave me chills. It was about the labor market. They talked about construction workers in Russia.
The cement mixer analogy.
Yeah. So picture a construction worker in provincial Russia. The construction sector, the brick as they call it, is slowing down because the civilian economy is tanking. Interest rates are high. People aren't building houses. So this worker is losing his job. He can't feed his family.
Okay.
And the source says they swapped the cement mixer for the meat grinder.
Meaning they join the front lines.
Because it's the only job left that actually pays a steady, inflated wage.
That is incredibly grim.
It is a grim, vivid example of how economic deterioration acts as an incentive to keep the country at war. If the civilian economy offers absolutely nothing, the army offers a paycheck. So the worse the economy gets, the more easy recruits Putin has for his war machine.
Okay, let's recap this because it's terrifying. We have a Russia that needs war to survive economically. It's like a shark that has to keep swimming or it dies. We have an America that is sending mixed signals, acting like that flickering light bulb in the torture room. And we have a Europe that is paralyzed by the ambiguity.
It is a highly volatile mix. It's tinder, gasoline, and a guy playing with matches who might be blindfolded.
And that brings us to the prediction. The deep dive references a forecast by French diplomat Michel Duclos. And he actually puts a date on the boiling point.
Between 2028 and 2030.
That is very soon. That's 2 to 4 years from now.
It is literally just around the corner. Duclos outlines a nightmare scenario where 3 specific factors converge. He believes that if 2 or more of these happen at the exact same time, Europe is in deep trouble.
Let's walk through them. Factor number 1.
U.S. neutralization. Now, this isn't necessarily about who is president. It is about political tensions inside the U.S., erupting to the point where the U.S. is taken off the board as a global actor.
So, domestic chaos, riots, constitutional crises, gridlock. Basically, the superpower looks inward to put out its own house fire, leaving Europe alone on the lawn.
Exactly. If Washington is paralyzed by internal strife, they simply cannot coordinate response to Moscow. The phone rings in the White House and nobody answers. That's factor 1. Factor number 2, Pacific focus. Specifically, a Chinese siege of Taiwan.
Which would naturally draw whatever attention and resources the U.S. has left toward Asia.
Leaving Europe completely exposed. The U.S. Navy is powerful, but it can't be in the North Atlantic and the South China Sea at full strength simultaneously.
Right. And then factor number 3. And I have to say, this one is super counterintuitive. I read this twice in the source material. He lists a ceasefire in Ukraine.
Yes.
Wait, a ceasefire. Usually we think of peace as a definitively good thing. Why is a cessation of hostilities on the list of nightmare scenarios?
Remember what we just discussed about the Russian economy?
A shark that needs to keep swimming.
Exactly. It is a machine that needs to eat war. If the fighting stops in Ukraine, Russia cannot simply demilitarize. They have factories churning out shells 24/7. They have hundreds of thousands of men under arms who have no jobs to go back to because the civilian economy is dead. If the war stops, the economy collapses.
So they have all these mobilized troops, all this military production, and nowhere to put it.
And nowhere to put it. So The fear, and this is the terrifying logic of the war economy, is that a ceasefire in Ukraine frees up a wealth of military resources for other ventures.
Other ventures. That is a very polite way of saying invading someone else.
Correct. If they can't stop the machine, they have to point it at a new target. Maybe the Baltics, maybe Moldova, maybe Georgia. The point is, peace in Ukraine might just be the prelude to war elsewhere if the underlying economic structure of Russia demands conflict.
So let's paint the final picture here. If we have a U.S. domestic crisis, a Taiwan crisis, and a paused Ukraine war all happening in 2029.
Then Europe holds its breath. That is the perfect storm Duclos is warning about. You have a Russia that is armed to the teeth, desperate for a target to keep its economy floating, and facing a Europe that is unsupported by the U.S.
It really paints a picture of extreme fragility. We tend to think of the status quo as solid, like concrete. We think this is how the world is. But this deep dive suggests it's much more like thin ice.
And the ice is cracking. You can hear it right under your feet.
So let's try to synthesize this for the listener, because we've covered a lot of ground today, from Truth Social posts to Estonian construction workers. What is the main takeaway here? Why should you, listening to this on your commute or at the gym, care?
It means we are actively moving out of an era of stability and into an era of high-stakes ambiguity. The torture we talked about at the very beginning, that confusion stemming from U.S. mixed signals, is dismantling the psychological safety net of the West. It's making everyone second-guess their alliances.
And simultaneously, Russia is physically testing the physical safety net. The borders, the cables, the airspace.
Right. And their internal logic, the economic trap, compels them to keep pushing. They are on a bicycle. If they stop pedaling, they fall over.
It's not just about Eastern Europe, then, is it?
No, not at all. This matters to everyone. If you're listening to this in London or Berlin or New York, this matters because it represents a massive global shift. The mechanisms we always relied on, U.S. protection, the deterrent of economic sanctions are proving unreliable. The red lines are gone. We are operating in a gray zone.
It's a very sobering reality check. We started with the idea of torture, of not knowing if you're going to get a handshake or a punch. And it seems like the entire geopolitical order is currently sitting in that chair.
Waiting for the door to open and just hoping it's a handshake.
I want to leave you with a final thought, something that really stuck with me from the source material. It's an existential question that ties all of this together. We've talked a lot today about hybrid war, cyber attacks, drones, sabotage. It's war, but not officially war. It's designed to be confusing. But if clarity from the superpowers is gone, and if the red lines are being actively blurred by this constant poking, at what specific point does a hybrid war become a real one?
That is the ultimate question.
Right.
When does a cut cable become an act of war? When does a drone crash become an airstrike?
And more importantly, if that transition happens, if a poke becomes an actual invasion, and it happens right during a U.S. domestic crisis or a Taiwan siege, who picks up the phone?
Yeah.
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for listening.
Stay curious and stay informed.